The Galactic Coalition Command Center hummed with the usual controlled chaos of 1,000 species conducting the business of civilization. Security protocols at the entrance were legendarily strict biometric scans, psionic barriers, molecular authentication. Even high commanders sometimes waited hours for clearance, which made what happened next all the more impossible. Cerise Vale walked through the main entrance like she owned the place, and the security systems didn't even blink. Not because they malfunctioned, but because they'd simply allowed her passage, granted her the highest level of clearance without question. But it wasn't Cerise that had the security officers frozen in their tracks. It was what walked beside her. 4 Catherine cubs padded along at her sides and rear, their crystalline fur shimmering with adolescent patterns that hadn't yet settled into adult coloration. The lead cub, slightly larger than the others, walked at her right side with the disciplined precision of a trained guardian. His name was Rack, and his violet eyes scanned the corridor with an intensity that belied his youth. Catherine cubs, the offspring of the galaxy's apex predators. The children of a species so ferociously protective of their young that entire star systems had been raised over custody disputes. Cubs that were never, ever seen outside their homeworld until reaching maturity at 50 standard years. And they were following a human, behaving like her personal security detail. By the 7 suns, breathed Officer Dex, a 4-armed Vorlian whose combat experience spanned 3 wars. His primary hands hovered over his weapon, but years of training warred with pure instinct. Is that? Don't, his partner hissed, a serpentine Sith whose thermal vision was locked on the impossible procession. Don't even think about interfering. Cerise seemed completely unbothered by the commotion she was causing. She wore simple civilian clothes, a worn jacket, comfortable pants, boots that had seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carried a standard datapad tucked under one arm. She looked like a low-level technician, not someone who should have access to the command center's most restricted areas. Rack made a low chittering sound, and Ceres glanced down at him with a slight smile. I know, buddy. Almost there. She spoke to him, casually, like he was a pet. The cub responded with what could only be described as a pleased rumble, his tail swishing in a complex pattern that Catherine linguists had spent centuries trying to decode. By now, alarms should have been blaring. Security teams should have been converging. Instead, the command center's AI Argus, one of the most sophisticated security systems in known space, was actively clearing a path for her. Doors opened before she reached them. Lifts arrived precisely when she needed them. Even the crowd seemed to part instinctively. Species from 100 worlds backing away from the human and her impossible escort. Commander Vextharn was the first high-ranking officer to intercept her, though intercept was perhaps too strong a word. The towering Draconid blocked her path 3 corridors from the high command chambers, his obsidian scales gleaming under the harsh lighting, his hand resting on the plasma disruptor at his hip. Ceres Vale, he growled, his voice a subsonic rumble that made the walls vibrate. You will explain yourself, immediately. The cubs tensed. All 4 of them shifted into protective stances around Cerise, their crystalline fur beginning to glow with the faint energy fields that made adult Kethrins nearly invulnerable in combat. Rack stepped forward, positioning himself directly between Vextharn and Cerise, and the sound he made was no longer playful. It was a warning. One that carried the weight of an entire species' military might behind it. Vextharn, decorated veteran of the Frontier Wars, hero of the Siege of Korriban, fighter who had stared down void beasts, without flinching took an involuntary step backward. Stand down, Commander, Cerise said quietly, her hand resting gently on Rack's head. The cub's glow dimmed slightly, but didn't disappear. I'm here on diplomatic business. The cubs are my escort, as agreed upon in the Kethrin Treaty of last season. That treaty was signed 3 days ago, Vextharn managed, struggling to keep his voice steady. And it said nothing about... It said everything about this, Ceres interrupted, her tone patient but firm. Article 7, subsection 12. Species who have proven worthy of cub trust shall be granted all rights and privileges thereof, including but not limited to passage rights, territorial sovereignty, and diplomatic immunity. The High Matriarch sent these cubs specifically because they trust me. Which means, by Kethrin law, I'm untouchable. Vextharn's eyes widened as the implications crashed over him. Cub trust. It was a concept that had been theoretical until now. A clause the Kethrins had insisted on, including that the Coalition had assumed would never actually matter. Humans had been part of the Galactic Coalition for barely 2 decades. They were still considered a minor species, interesting primarily for their strange adaptability and reckless bravery. Useful as shock troops and explorers, but not particularly important on the galactic stage. Except now one of them had somehow earned cub trust from the Kethrans. Which meant, in the eyes of the galaxy's most powerful warrior species, this human was family. How? The word escaped Vextharn before he could stop it. How did you possibly? I listen, Ceres said simply. 2 years ago, the Kethrans reached out to human xenobiologists, requesting help with a disease affecting their cubs. Something their own medicine couldn't cure. While your politicians were scheduling meetings and forming committees, I was already on a transport to their homeworld with a team of virologists. We worked with their healers, combined their biological knowledge with our adaptive immune research, and we saved an entire generation. She looked down at Rak, her expression softening. This guy's clutch brother was one of the first cubs we cured. The matriarchs asked what reward I wanted. I told them I just wanted to be friends. Rak made a sound that was unmistakably affectionate, pressing his head against Ceres's leg. Turns out, Ceres continued, Kethrans take friendship very seriously. Behind Vextharn, more officers had gathered, including High Commander Zolther herself, the Lumini whose tactical genius had won the Coalition its independence from the hegemony. The ancient being's energy form flickered with colors that indicated profound surprise. The Kethrans have never extended cub trust to any species beyond their own, Zolther said, her voice like crystal chimes. Never. In 12,000 years of recorded history. Maybe they were waiting for someone who'd help without expecting something in return, Ceres said. She checked her datapad. Now, if you'll excuse me, the matriarchs are waiting. We have a cultural exchange program to finalize. Apparently, several Kethran families want to send their cubs to human worlds for education. She walked past the stunned commander, past the gathering crowd of Coalition personnel, toward the high command chambers. The cubs moved with her in perfect synchronization, Rak maintaining his position at her side like a seasoned bodyguard. As the doors to the chamber opened, triggered automatically by the high commander, accessed the cubs. Presence had granted her. Ceres paused and looked back. Oh, and Commander? You might want to update your security protocols. Humanity just became a Tier 1 diplomatic power. We're going to be coming and going quite a bit from now on. The doors closed behind her, leaving the command center in stunned silence. In the centuries that followed, historians would mark this moment as the true beginning of humanity's rise in galactic affairs. Not through conquest or political maneuvering, but through something the galaxy had almost forgotten the value of: genuine compassion. And it had all started with one woman who'd helped some cubs and asked for nothing but friendship in return. The Kethrans, it turned out, remembered debts like that.